Good evening, everyone. You're looking at a live view of the SpaceX launch site at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, about an hour east of Orlando, Florida. You can see the Falcon 9 rocket there with the payload fairing on top. It's a great evening out at the Cape so far, just before sunset with a pretty cloudy sky. Range has us at a 40% likelihood of permissible weather, so we should be ready to launch in just under 40 minutes from now. Welcome, and thank you for joining us again. If you don't know me yet, I'm Sarah Walker, Mission Manager here at SpaceX. Joining me to give you the exciting coverage of today's launch is John Innsbrucker, the Falcon 9 Product Director. John is a highly respected leader here in our work to develop innovative, safe, and reliable launch vehicles. John will be giving us updates on the vehicle, the weather, and the range status throughout the afternoon as we count down to launch. We last saw you just a few months ago when we launched CRS-3, which just returned safely from the International Space Station less than a month ago. The mission was an incredible success for so many reasons. All the cargo was safely delivered to the astronaut crew on board the space station, and they received it and repacked Dragon full of return cargo to send back to Earth on Dragon's flight home. We also carried up 2 important science payloads in Dragon's unpressurized trunk, which were robotically extracted by the space station arm and installed on the exterior of the space station. And finally, this flight was the first time SpaceX flew landing legs on Falcon 9. Our onboard rocket cameras were able to capture some fantastic images of the first stage, which flew back to Earth after completing its part of the flight, landing smoothly over the ocean. Seeing those images was a fulfilling moment for all of us here as we work hard to develop the first truly reusable rockets ever built. But enough about CRS-3. We're here today because in just a few minutes, we'll be launching a dedicated flight for Orbcomm, sending up the first 6 of 17 satellites for Orbcomm's og2 satellite constellation. We're webcasting to you live from SpaceX headquarters here in Hawthorne, California, where we both design and build the Falcon rockets and Dragon spacecraft. Later in today's webcast, we'll tell you more about Orbcomm, the og2 satellite constellation being launched today, and a little about Sierra Nevada Space Systems, who manufactured these satellites for Orbcomm. But first, let's switch to a view of the rocket on the pad and let John give us an update on how things are unfolding for today's mission.
Thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon. I'm John Innsbrucker, the Falcon 9 Product Director. I've been listening to the countdown the last few hours, and I'll be bringing you status updates during our webcast as I've done on previous webcasts. And welcome to our 3rd launch webcast of 2014. The SpaceX team is looking forward to today's launch, and we'll be coming up on the culmination of all our work in just a little while. Now currently, the countdown is going on at Cape Canaveral. Falcon 9 is counting down for an opening of the launch window at 6:08:53 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or 22 hours, 8 minutes, 53 seconds Universal Time. Our launch window lasts 53 minutes today, and we'll be launching from our Cape Canaveral Air Force Station launch site in Florida, Space Launch Complex 40. Currently, the SpaceX launch team is not working any significant issues with the Falcon 9. We rolled out to the launch pad early this morning and went vertical. At about T-minus 4 hours, we began loading the RP-1 kerosene fuel propellant on board the first and second stage of the Falcon 9. About 30 minutes later, we started liquid oxygen loading onto both stages. Currently, all the fuel is on board, the liquid oxygen is on board, and we're just topping off liquid oxygen on both the first and the second stages. You can see that by the white plumes of gaseous oxygen coming off the rocket on the webcast screen right now. That'll continue up until just the last minutes before countdown. But we've currently got our standard propellant load on board the Falcon 9, 850,000 pounds of propellant on the first stage and 200,000 pounds of propellant on the second stage. Also earlier today, we ran our electrical checkouts of the Falcon 9 avionics, what we call our vehicle integrity test. We passed that test, and we've also conducted flight safety checks with the Air Force range. On the spacecraft side, we're carrying 6 Orbcomm og2 satellites today for our Orbcomm customer. They're getting ready for their final significant activity, which is the switch to internal battery power of the spacecrafts, coming up in just a few minutes. We'll get their final status at T-minus 13 minutes. The Air Force is also supporting today's launch. They're bringing flight safety and tracking radars to cover the mission. They're currently online and capable of supporting the launch. Finally, the big item we've been watching all day, we've been red, we've been green, and right now we are green, is the weather. We are between kind of a front on the east and a front on the west, but it looks like we might just be able to squeeze in today with green weather. So currently, all conditions are go for a launch in just under 28 minutes from now, Sarah.
As John mentioned, the launch window for today's launch runs from 6:08 to 7:01 p.m. Eastern Time, which should give us a great pre-sunset view of the launch all the way to orbit. But if we miss today's liftoff due to weather or any other reason, we can reset and try again tomorrow. As I mentioned earlier, today's launch of the Falcon 9 will carry several Orbcomm Generation 2 satellites, or og2, which are intended to supplement and eventually replace Orbcomm's first generation of satellites. Orbcomm is a global satellite data communications company providing two-way machine-to-machine or end-to-end communications. As a part of a $230 million expansion program, the og2 satellites are far more advanced than the first generation. They provide enhanced coverage and allow for larger message sizes and data rates for Orbcomm customers. They're also equipped with an automatic identification system, or AIS, for tracking vessels to improve maritime safety for government and commercial customers worldwide. This og2 constellation will contain 17 satellites in total, all of which have been manufactured for Orbcomm by Sierra Nevada Corporation, based in Louisville, Colorado. Sierra Nevada is a world-class prime systems integrator with electronic systems provider known for its rapid, innovative, and agile technology solutions. Today's launch carries the first 6 of those 17 satellites into orbit. The production of the remaining 11 satellites in the constellation is on track to be ready for SpaceX's next og2 launch, which is currently scheduled for the 4th quarter of this year. In view of these important assets and state-of-the-art technologies we're carrying for our customers, our primary objective at SpaceX is to deliver their payload to orbit safely and reliably. To provide the most reliable launch vehicles and spacecraft ever flown, SpaceX continuously advances the boundaries of what's possible, both technologically and organizationally. It's challenging, but it's the only way to make real progress towards our ambitious goals. John, can you share a little bit more about the Falcon 9 rocket?
Sarah mentioned reliability. One of the things that we emphasize here at SpaceX with the Falcon 9 is a series of efforts, system testing, test what you fly, test like you fly. The Falcon 9 that's currently on the pad at Cape Canaveral has been through the same process as previous Falcon 9s. This includes sending complete first stage and second stage through static fire testing at our McGregor, Texas test facility. There we take the flight propellant tanks, the flight engines, and the flight electronics. They're all together just in the regular configuration, and then we static fire the stage. This gives us a chance to ring out the first stage and second stage in an end-to-end systems test before we ship them to the launch site. In addition, Sarah mentioned our space station launch back in April. We have reviewed the data from that flight. Falcon 9 did an excellent job of taking Dragon up into orbit. So we've looked at that data, done the reviews, everything looks good. We also got a chance to look at the data for the successful landing in the Atlantic Ocean as we recovered onto the water the first stage. Unfortunately, as our boss has pointed out, weather conditions prevented us from actually being on site. Today we're flying another recoverable configuration, Falcon 9, and you can tell that mostly by the landing legs that are on the back end of the first stage. Now, just like other Falcon 9s, we have gone through static fire. We did that last Friday, put the rocket together, rolled out to the pad, did static fire. That gives us one last chance to show that the ground and launch vehicle systems are integrated, ready to go. It also demonstrated what we called our hold before release system, where we count down the rocket, fire it up to full thrust, hold on to it, and then in the case of static fire, shut it down. That's something we can do because we've got liquid propulsion. You can hold on to the rocket before you release it, kind of like when you enter the runway on your airplane, and they throttle it up before releasing the brakes. If you use solid rocket motors, you can't do that. Once you light a solid, you can't turn it off or shut it down. So that's another feature that we have in the Falcon 9 system. Now currently out at the Cape on the Falcon 9 side, they're continuing to top off the Falcon 9 first and second stages that you can see on the screen. The next big event for us will be the readiness poll in about 10 minutes, and we'll bring that to you as it happens. The engineers I can hear talking on the comm nets, they're just checking to make sure there's anything that they need to worry about in the last minutes. Satellites remain go for launch. They're in the middle of transferring the internal power right now. The range is monitoring their systems, and currently they've got all the required assets that we need. And finally, the weather continues to look good. We've also been releasing balloons to look at upper altitude winds, and currently we're also good for upper altitude winds. So the whole stack is ready to go for launch coming up in just over 22 minutes from now.
Falcon 9 is a truly impressive vehicle, representing the efforts of a world-class workforce and cutting-edge manufacturing and integration techniques. We do extensive testing at the component level and at the system level to verify both nominal functionality and additional functional margin for safety and reliability. But no amount of testing can equate to exposing the technology to the rigors of a real environment. Fortunately, we've now done so 4 times in the last 9 months alone. The first time was last September, launching the Cassiope satellite out of our new launch pad at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. We then followed with 2 satellite launches from our Cape Canaveral launch site to geosynchronous transfer orbits. That was SES-8 in November and TICOM-6 in January. And of course, the most recent was CRS-3, carrying Dragon to the International Space Station in April. Overall, we've had great success with this vehicle so far, and we look forward to liftoff just a short while from now. For today's mission, while there's no guarantee we'll have video coverage, we expect to be able to follow the vehicle via onboard cameras here on the webcast, likely through the completion of the burn of the second stage engine to place us into the final orbit. Separation of the Orbcomm satellites begins shortly afterward, but we won't be covering that live on the webcast today. However, we will continue to provide text updates online at SpaceX.com and on Twitter via the @SpaceX handle. One event we hope to observe is the separation of the payload fairing. This brief video clip gives you a sense of what it may look like. This was captured at NASA Glenn's Plum Brook Station in the recently built Reverberant Acoustic Test Facility. For those of you that aren't familiar with the word fairing, it's the bullet-shaped shell at the top of the rocket that encapsulates the satellite or payload during launch and protects it from the rough launch environment, while simultaneously increasing the aerodynamics of the vehicle. At 43 feet long and 17 feet in diameter at its widest point, the SpaceX fairing is large enough to fit a city bus inside. The fairing separates into 2 halves when the rocket is traveling nearly 10 times the speed of sound. That's 4 times faster than a speeding bullet, and 3 times faster than the fastest known manned aircraft, the SR-71 Blackbird.
Right now we're continuing to count down out at the Cape. Looking at the clock, we're just over 20 minutes to go before the planned liftoff. Listening to the discussion on the nets, currently the spacecraft folks are in the middle of transfer to internal power, as I discussed earlier. We're also looking at the final propellant loads and gas pressure loads on the Falcon 9. Team's currently looking at some of the leak checks, making sure that we're ready to go. We'll get some more status as we come up at T-minus 13 minutes. Now, a word about what's going to come next. After this launch, we've currently got the Falcon 9 first, second stages, and the inner stage for the next mission planned for the middle of July are already out at Cape Canaveral. Once we get through this opportunity, we'll be bringing that hardware out to the launch complex, integrate those stages as we've done with this one, process that next customer, and get ready for a launch coming up about a month from now.
SpaceX is the world's fastest growing launch services provider. We have nearly 50 launches on manifest, and 2014 has been and will continue to be a very busy year. We'll be launching numerous commercial satellites, a satellite for the United States Air Force, and more cargo resupply missions to the International Space Station. Also, as a part of the Commercial Crew Integrated Capability Program, we expect to conduct up to 2 ascent abort tests in 2014 with our crew version of Dragon. Both are to demonstrate that if anything anomalous were to occur with the Falcon 9 while the crew is on board, the Dragon spacecraft is capable of separating itself from the rocket and parachuting the crew to safety. Finally, we have some exciting plans for the continued development of a reusable first stage that can return to the launch pad after launch. One of the most influential factors in safely achieving such an aggressively paced launch schedule is that we manufacture nearly everything for our launch vehicles and spacecraft here in-house at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Right next to me is the composite section, where we manufacture the strong, lightweight carbon composite parts for our launch vehicles and spacecraft. Across the aisle from that is the propulsion section, where our Merlin engines are assembled. Behind that is the Dragon clean room, where our spacecraft gets integrated and tested before being shipped to the Cape for a launch. In the back are our massive friction stir welding machines, where we fabricate our tanks, domes, and stages for the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch vehicles. Speaking of the Heavy, we look forward to the debut of the Falcon Heavy, our newest line of launch vehicles. The Heavy will provide the world's largest available lift capacity, up to 53 metric tons, or 117,000 pounds, to low Earth orbit. That's the equivalent of a 737 jetliner loaded with passengers, crew, luggage, and fuel. It's more than twice the lift capacity of the next closest operational vehicle, the Delta IV Heavy, at 1/3 the cost. I really can't wait to see those first Falcon Heavy launches out of Vandenberg.
John Innsbrucker back here at the Falcon 9 launch desk. We're continuing to listen to the countdown, just under T-minus 17 minutes. We're continuing to work through the countdown at Cape Canaveral, listening to some discussions as they're reviewing data from the leak checks on the Falcon 9. Not clear whether or not there's an issue or they're just looking at some data. We'll hear some more of that probably at the T-minus 13 minute poll. Now today's launch window extends for 53 minutes. This is a little different than the launch window we had for the April launch to the space station, which was just 1 second. With 53 minutes, we've got an opportunity, if we need to hold, work any issues, and then still possibly get an attempt later in the window. Now typically what happens for a Falcon 9 countdown is that we would hold at the T-minus 13 minute point. That's a logical point where we're about ready to pull the team and enter into terminal count, where the flight computer on the Falcon 9 and the ground computers take over automated checkout of the countdown. Now if we go past 13 minutes and we start into the terminal countdown sequence and somebody calls a hold, then we can recycle back to T-minus 13 minutes and assess the situation. That's a safe stopping point for the Falcon 9 with the spacecraft on top. Now currently on the spacecraft side, they're in the middle still of the final transfer of internal power. So we'll hear what happened with that at T-minus 13 minutes in the readiness poll, and we'll bring that to you live. Now as we get inside of T-minus 10 minutes, we'll enter what we call the terminal countdown sequence. We'll open up pre-valves that separate the Merlin first stage engines from the fuel and the liquid oxygen tanks. And we begin chilling in the engines with liquid oxygen to the top of the turbo pumps. Now you'll see that if we happen to have a close-up of the bottom of the rocket of white gaseous oxygen plumes coming out from the bottom of the vehicle. That's standard for this point of the countdown. We'll chill those engines in for the last few minutes of the count to make sure that the operating temperatures are correct. At about T-minus 6 minutes, you'll see the transport erector currently clamped around the vehicle, open the clamp up and release and pull away from the Falcon 9. Finally, in the last minute, then we will close the vents off, stop venting the gaseous oxygen off of the stages, and pressurize the tanks up to flight pressure. Now currently, as I said, the Falcon 9 team is going through the data. Chief engineer is checking with the team, getting ready for the readiness poll. Spacecraft folks are working no issues. We'll hear how they're doing in just a few minutes. The range continues to be ready to support And so far, nobody has sent us anything saying that the weather has gone from green to anything else. It looks like we may be able to sneak in between the systems with green weather. And finally, the upper altitude winds continue to look good. We'll get one more piece of balloon data, but we should be good for the entire window tonight.
The energy level is really starting to build down on the factory floor. The SpaceX team is gathered for launch on this exciting Friday afternoon, looking into the Mission Control Center right behind me. This scene is typical around launch time. Everyone at SpaceX is passionate about what we do here and is completely invested in getting our customers to orbit successfully. So you'll always see a crowd excited to see another mission reach its destination. That's one of my favorite parts about working at SpaceX, watching launch while standing next to all of my teammates that worked so hard to make the launch happen. As I mentioned before, after today's launch, you can follow us at SpaceX.com and on our social media pages for updates. And we now have an online SpaceX shop open too. Check out all the great new SpaceX gear at shop.spacex.com. Well, it's almost time to switch over to the launch pad cameras. So let's first check in with John for one final status update on the vehicle.
Well, for those who are watching the webcast, you may have noticed over Sarah's shoulder, the T clock just jumped to T-minus 1 hour and 5 minutes and 42 seconds. What I was talking about earlier, the team is looking at leak check data. It appears that the engineers will need some more time to take a look at the readings they're getting. Now, as a precaution, rather than trying to just hit a launch window several minutes from now, what they've opted to do is move to the end of the launch window, which will be about 53 minutes later, or as you can see right now, 65 minutes from now. So what we're going to do is we'll stay on the air, but we'll be showing shots of the vehicle at the Cape. You can admire the sunset as it comes later this evening in Florida. I'll be listening to the countdown nets, try to come back with an update on what's happening at the Cape, what the prognosis is, and our path ahead. But for the moment, we won't be going into the readiness poll at T-minus 13 minutes. Instead, we've done a clock jump backwards, and we'll continue as we were at the start of the webcast, monitoring systems, continue to top off the Falcon 9. We're in a safe configuration right now. Undoubtedly, the spacecraft folks will probably transfer back to external power so that they can save the batteries. And so we'll be back into the same position we were a little bit earlier when we started the webcast. Find out what's happening, assess what our possibility is for being able to launch at the end of the window, and we'll come back to you shortly, possibly in about 10 minutes or so, when we've got an update from Cape Canaveral. But with that, we're going to leave you now with a shot of the vehicle at the Cape, but please stay tuned to the webcast. We'll bring you information as we've got it available, and thanks for staying with us.
35 minutes and counting. T-minus 30 minutes and counting. ABI, are you ready to close out 6 feet charge?
ABI is ready. Mission Manager, notify spacecraft controller to switch to internal power. Copy. Customer notified to go on internal power.
Good afternoon or good evening, depends where you are. This is John Innsbrucker back at the Falcon 9 launch desk. Just a quick update. Team's continuing to troubleshoot the Falcon 9. We've been monitoring in-terminal count as per normal. The tank pressure is in the second stage. We saw a pressure decrease. The team elected not to continue into the terminal countdown sequence. They've been spending some time looking at whether or not this might be on the vehicle or is it in the ground systems that are hooked up to the Falcon 9. They're continuing to troubleshoot. The current plan is that the spacecraft will go to internal power, currently getting underway right now, and we will do a readiness poll at T-minus 13 minutes. So we'll come back and bring that to you live. We do have the opportunity as we go through the countdown to hold all the way down to the last second of the countdown should we need to. So while we have not determined yet whether or not we are going to make a launch attempt at the end of the window, we are continuing to protect the launch window, and we will come back to you at about T-minus 15 minutes to bring you that readiness poll and watch what happens as we go through the rest of the evening. So for now, Falcon 9 spacecraft continue to be in good condition. The range is ready to support. Weather looks good still. Everybody can support a launch coming up in just under 25.5 minutes, and we'll come back to you in just over 10.5 minutes. This is John Innsbrucker from the Falcon 9 launch desk. Okay, we're back here at SpaceX Falcon 9 launch desk. We're listening to the team as they get ready for the terminal count readiness poll at T-minus 13 minutes. Currently, Falcon 9 continues to look into the pressure decrease. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we'll look at the data up until the last minute or so of the count. We have that flexibility in the countdown to safely look at data and, if need be, hold the countdown. Now, if we do have to hold the countdown, that would end the launch attempt for today. Then we would look possibly at coming back tomorrow. The spacecraft folks are ready to go. They're transferring to internal power. They'll give their readiness check coming up here in just another minute. The range continues to be ready to support, and the weather continues to cooperate through this nearly 50-minute hold. So everything continues to be ready to support the terminal count sequence and the T0 coming up just after 1 minute after the hour. Now currently we've had a couple of great missions to start out 2014, but the important one obviously is the one that's right in front of us. Clearly the team's done a lot of hard work. We've done the reviews. We're still looking at data right now, but with that we're going to continue into the terminal countdown readiness poll, and we'll watch what happens here with you. And right now we're going to switch over to the Countdown 1 net to listen to Brian Childers, the SpaceX launch director, poll the 13 team members for their readiness to go into the terminal count. We'll be with you after the launch. Thanks.
Execute the terminal count poll.
And all stations on the countdown net, I'm going to go ahead and try to do the poll. Verify ready for launch. FTS?
FTS, go.
AVI?
AVI's go.
Ground? BC? GC? RC?
Go.
OSM?
Go.
Rock? Rock? CE?
Rocks go.
C's no go.
MM? LD?
LD is go with terminal count, however we will evaluate further into the count.
Prop, are you go?
Props go to go into terminal count.
GNC?
GNC agrees with CE, no go.
Copy. CE, can you set the warning phase to terminal count, please?
Copy, will come.
LC, I'm standing by to push the terminal count.
And BC, start the terminal count auto sequence set to start at T-minus 10 minutes.
Copy, proceed.
And all personnel, if a hold is called from this point forward, the terminal count auto sequence will be aborted. Indicate an abort or hold condition by saying hold, hold, hold on the primary countdown net. In this event, the VC will immediately abort the auto sequence. The VC shall not abort the auto sequence after T-minus 10 seconds, and operators shall not call a hold after T-minus 10 seconds. If a hold is called, all operators proceed to the terminal count auto abort steps in section 10.64. Mission manager can confirm you're on internal power.
Confirm internal power.
Copy. Copy that. GCVC standby on FireX. RC, start the tracking camera video recorder.
Started.
OSM, set launch enable to flight.
Clear flight. ETV warnings have been cleared.
On countdown, this is stage 2. We are abort.
Copy.
Terminal count abort started.
And all personnel, this is LC. Proceed to terminal count abort auto sequence, or section 10.64. DC, abort the terminal count auto sequence if not already
Terminal
aborted.
count aborted.
CE, set the warnings phase to terminal count abort. GCVC, reactivate FireX if present in the launch mount.
Copy.
CE, set warnings phase to terminal count abort.
That's complete.
Well, this is John Isberger again from the Falcon 9 launch desk. As we just heard, the team did call an abort in the terminal count sequence. Clock just running out of time to give the team enough minutes to evaluate the data we've been looking at for the last hour. So right now we are going in and putting the Falcon 9 into a safe configuration. This is a standard recovery sequence for the Falcon 9. We've used it after other countdowns if you've been with us before. So the launch vehicle, the spacecraft are okay. We'll be looking at offloading propellants. The team will get an opportunity to continue to look at data on the second stage pressure decay that we saw. And Sarah, it looks like we'll be safe, and then we'll see where we go next.
Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of the live webcast. We hope you'll join us for our next attempt, which is could be as soon as 24 hours from now. Please check SpaceX.com, where we'll post updates as soon as information is available. We look forward to seeing you at the next launch attempt.
So on behalf of everyone here at SpaceX, thank you for following us on the webcast. And hopefully we might get a chance to come back just tomorrow. Check with us on the social media pages to see when our next launch attempt is. But for now, please come back when we announce the next launch attempt for Falcon 9, carrying our Orbcomm customer spacecraft into orbit. And that'll wrap it up for this evening. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.
We'll see you then.